Hello traders, this is Greg here from Master Trader. I'm going to talk about turning points, and we're going to be looking at the way this happens in different ways over the coming weeks. One of the most simple ways to recognize a probable turning point is to see where there was one before. As simple as that sounds, it really works extremely well. So let's look at a couple of charts. Sometimes turning points happen which appear to be in the middle of nowhere. This typically happens in really strong trends. When trends become a bit more erratic, they begin to pull back a little bit. Things become a little uncertain about the trend continuing. So what we do is we let it pivot. That's what this is, PL, pivot low, pivot high. Now, when the pivot highs and pivot lows are relatively close together, things tend to be choppy. Nonetheless, if we're looking for trading opportunities, we focus on what's directly to the left. So when there's a pivot low here, our assumption is that buyers are going to show up there again. When there's a prior pivot high, we assume that traders are going to show up there again to sell. Now, when they're relatively close together, things tend to be choppy because there's buyers down here and there's sellers up here. Now, why this took off from there? Well, that's another discussion. However, one of the things we're going to look for is how strong was the prior move. In this case, there was a strong move down that took out both of these lows. In that type of a situation, in the future, we'll be looking for turning points like this, because that's when they typically happen on one turn, even before this becomes a pivot. Realize that this won't become a pivot until there's 3 bars to the right side of it. So we're trading it before it becomes a pivot. Now, what we're looking for is something that's trending. In this case, prices were trending down. It forms a pivot. Now, I'm looking for sellers to show up in this area again. Now, whether they show up a little bit below, right at, a little bit above, I don't know. It's okay. Once it's in this area, I'm then waiting for a reversal. Now, in this case, it was going up, and then we got this topping tail type of a bar. Now, I like topping tail type of bars because it was a big green bar prior becoming a topping tail bar. I see that sellers took control and knocked it back down. Now, you might say, well, what about this congestion here? Reasonable question to ask. We look at what we call the weight of the evidence. In this case, it was a very sharp move down. It pivoted and it retested. So in a downtrend, our assumption is lows get taken out. So one of your turning points in your toolbox, so to speak, will be retest patterns within an uptrend or a downtrend. Let's look at the spiders, which are going to look relatively similar. And you can see the sharp move down and then the pivot, and it came directly up here and then moved back down again. Now let's look at this on a 5-minute chart, because everything applies to any time frame we're going to look at. We have to choose what time frames we're going to look at. I like the 5-minute time frame for an intraday time frame, and same concept. Move down. Here was a pivot. It began to turn here. Could we have shorted this? Possibly. And we could have gotten stopped out, of course. Eventually we'll get into talking about money management. However, pivot high, we look for sellers to be in this area. It comes up into that area, and now a big red bar down. What do? Well, choices. Short it under the low. Stop a little bit above the high. Now I could do a half lot. Money management makes things very flexible. So that could have been an entry point. If it happened too fast, which sometimes obviously it does, and you can wait for the next one. So again, as I said, we're looking for areas. So it could have happened anywhere up in here. As it comes up toward that area, we wait for a reversal. Now, this didn't get quite that close to it. So we would have to put a stop up above here and then manage it accordingly. So we can apply this concept of retest patterns to any time frame. And from a swing trading perspective, we would be using the daily time frame. Often we do that in combination with weekly time frames, and intraday time frames, the 5-minute in combination with the hourly time frame. Let's just take a look at the hourly and a retest pattern. This actually happened on Friday where there was a pivot high up here. Prices came up to it. Our expectation, there's going to be sellers up there. Now we then wait to see if it actually makes the turn. Now we could trade it from this time frame, or we could then go and look at the 5-minute time frame, which was up here as it began to make the turn, and it fell, and then it formed a little retest pattern up here. So going forward, look for retests of prior pivot highs, and then look for turns. Obviously look at whether it's in an uptrend or a downtrend or a sideways trend. We'll be covering more of this in the future. If you have any questions, email myself, Greg@mastertrader.com.